But the county uses the worst damn system in the world with WebEx.
All right, I'm going to restart the recording right now. All right, we are up and running. Bob, if you don't mind kicking us off, we will then go ahead and get started with the project.
So sorry that everyone had to wait. We'll talk about that later. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. I'm sure most of you know the drill. We'd like you to introduce yourselves. We'll introduce ourselves. You'll get about 15 minutes to make your case. We'll have a staff report and then we'll open it for questions. So I'm Bob Gorman, chairman of the DAP, and let's go to the rest of our panel. Dan?
Dan Lovett, civil engineer.
Ethan?
Ethan Marchand, I'm an architect.
Who else do we have on our panel here?
Kelly. Kelly's here.
Kelly Hollenbeck, architect.
Hi, Kelly. And we need 4, right?
Yep, that's 4.
Okay. So if the participant would like to introduce the team.
Yeah, so this is Jeff Kirby of Kirby Development. We are the owner of the property and of the applicant. And with Kirby Development, we have Jake Kirby, Clay Kirby, and then our design team. I'm sure you know well, Rob Vogel, probably recognize him. And then we have from Ward Copeland Mock, the architects is Matt, Josh, and Ryan. So that's the team.
So, okay, if you'd like to go ahead and present the project.
Yeah, so the project is Station Overlook. So real quickly, I'm going to do very quickly, then I'll turn it over to Rob and Matt and the rest of the architects to kind of walk you through it. But the site is a little over just 8.3 acres, zoned both TOD and M2. We're proposing about 239 units in 2 buildings with open and structured parking and a number of amenities. We are pretty much across the street from the Savage Mark station and clearly in walking distance. And Rob will go into that a little bit more. And that's really the general overlay of the land of the project. And I'll let Rob kind of take over, go through the site, the area, and then the architects will walk you through the building. So I'll quickly turn it over to Rob Vogel.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate that. The project is located south of the Maryland Route 32 eastbound ramp to Dorsey Run Road. It is located between that and Carter Road to the south. To the east is existing Dorsey Run Road. This is a good vicinity map within Howard County. We are to the east or to the west of Carter Road, and to the south of Carter Road is basically Carter Road Industrial Park area. This is a designated, as Mr. Kirby alluded to, this is zoned TOD, as the county saw fit with the Mark train station to zone some of these closer properties to TOD. So it's kind of a transitional area that way. Very close to our site on the other side of Dorsey Run Road is the residences at Annapolis Junction. And of course, as you heard earlier, we're very close to the Savage Mark train station, which is located just on the other side of the rail line. And it's located technically inside Anne Arundel County. Dorsey Run Road within Anne Arundel County has other employment buildings in I believe it's zoned Anne Arundel County, that's W1 and W2. And there's a very large project under construction with the terminus of Dorsey Run Road that is not technically industrial, but it's a very large project under construction there that'll employ people as well. We're in close proximity to National Business Parkway, again, a big employment center and a big employment area. And of course, on the other side of BW Parkway is NSA. So it's a very good location for housing and being close to employment, and obviously very close to transportation. Go to the next slide. So this is kind of zeroing in a little bit closer. As you heard, the property is split zone TOD and M2. To the right upper corner, you'll see the M2, and that continues to go out. That M2 is not part of the actual development area. The development area is within the TOD, but that M2 area is wooded. It is forested. It will be our forest conservation requirement for the project. We anticipate that there will be some pathways through that mature forested area as well. Across the north side, on this view, it's plan north, but technically it would be on the west side of Carter Road are industrial uses that have existed there for some time. Some of the property over there is zoned TOD as well. A large majority beyond that then is zoned M2. Again, you can see on this view the proximity of the site, which is shaded red. Its close proximity to the MARC train station. The architects will speak to the pedestrian connectivity provided to that MARC train station. Okay. This is an interesting slide. This clear, again, zooming in a little closer to the site, and this is focused on the development portion of the site. And I did want to explain a couple of things. There is a culvert that runs under Carter Road. That culvert it accommodates the drainage from some of those industrial uses on the other side of Carter Road. I actually designed the pond that is feeding this culvert many years ago. It is picking up industrial runoff off some of these sites. Some of them are very industrial uses. And that combines with some of the road runoff. It's conveyed under Carter Road and discharges to an open channel. We met with MDE at the site concerning this channel. Our environmentalists did not believe it really qualifies as a stream. MDE wanted us to qualify it as a stream, wants it to be qualified as a stream. They have no problem with permitting that stream, and that is currently in process with MDE. It is of very low quality. If you've been out there, you'll see that it really does. It is a function of the ponds across the way, and the water quality is not very good. And the wetland was actually formed also from the same source across the road and the industrial runoff. It does convey in the channel, but if it overflows that channel a little bit, it feeds that little localized low spot, which developed into technically a wetland, but that is in for processing with Maryland Department of the Environment as well. MDE has been to the site, and they don't have issue with the permit that is before them. We have 4 specimen trees that are shown here with the green circles. We would be processing those in addition to the environmental impacts with Howard County as alternative compliance, and go through that process in addition to the MDE process. The runoff that I talked about that's in that channel, it is only in that channel for about 225 feet, after which it goes back into a closed storm drain system, and it is then conveyed to a fairly recently constructed SHA, a stormwater management facility, which is located at the bottom of this picture. To also note, to the left side of the site, closest, kind of adjoining, where all the confluence of all these roads, Dorsey Run Road, Junction Drive, and Carter Road, there's another stormwater management facility. It is not shaded on this particular view, but that is taking up the area between the road right of way and the property line there. So that's another rather large SHA stormwater facility. These properties really do this. The property that is proposed here is a function of SHA taking property many years ago for the reconstruction or the construction of the Route 32 Dorsey Run Road interchange, and this ended up being surplus property that they did not need once they finished with their project. I think that takes care of that slide. Go ahead, I'll turn this over to the architect team.
Great, thanks, Rob. So I just gotta walk through a little bit of the context. These are a series of photos surrounding the site. On the top left is the view looking up Corridor Road from Junction Drive, and that pond that Rob was talking about is in the foreground here with these kind of short truncated trees where it's labeled SHA site. And you can see our site is kind of sitting uphill along the right-hand side of Corridor Road. The top left view is a view of Dorsey Run Road, kind of from the same station point as the top left, just kind of looking, I'm sorry, a little bit further back down Junction Drive at Dorsey Run Road, but looking towards the right, you can see the edge of kind of the Annapolis Junction development that happened, I want to say maybe eight years ago. And you can see again the low area along Dorsey Run Road and our site kind of sitting up the hill behind those trees there. And then the lower left view, again, on Dorsey Run Road, just looking in the opposite direction, we're sitting here at the kind of intersection of the off ramp from the highway at Dorsey Run Road. And this is at a high point, whereas the top images are actually at a low point adjacent to our site. And then the image in the lower right corner is more or less standing where we will be looking at the development taking place. This is up on Corridor Road, looking south towards Annapolis Junction or the MARC station, and you can see it's relatively level at this location before it drops back downhill towards Junction Drive and Dorsey Run Road. Rob described some of the industrial context. This slide starts to look at the relationship to Annapolis Junction. This was a planned development at the Savage MARC station. It included a large multifamily building with a precast parking garage kind of in the center of it, as you can see here in this top view of the aerial photo. And then to the right of that photo is a parking deck with potential mixed-use infill happening there, as well as in the foreground of that aerial view is the large MARC parking garage that has about 914 spaces today. And so in the lower images show just kind of a close-up view of Annapolis Junction. It's kind of transitional architectural language there. And then the lower right is the view of the single-story retail. We did find an old image. Annapolis Junction was a railroad hub, a connection between two different railroads, linking the Baltimore-Washington corridor with a spur out to Annapolis. And so in general, this area was pretty much a large rail yard with some industrial uses around the edges. And so hopefully today we'll be looking at how this Annapolis Junction redevelopment has conferred some new potential, particularly on our site, which you can see here, and going back to that top left, just in the top corner there, not far from the MARC station. So again, this is that bird's eye, or this plan view of our site. And again, the intent is where we have the TOD zoned land, that is where we're focusing our development. And then to the top right, where it's not TOD zoned, we're going to allow that to stay in forest conservation with potential walking paths that connect back into that area. So within the TOD, it's about 4.6 acres of developable area. And the strategy here is to locate the geometry of the site is challenging. It's not a nice regular boundary for redevelopment. And so in keeping with some of the hydrology that crosses Corridor Road to the large stormwater facility, really forced this development to look at two separate buildings separated by that kind of drainage pattern through the middle of the site. And doing so, we have a multifamily building that is adjoined directly to a precast garage, and then the other building, the L-shaped building to page right, is more or less a slab on grade building at the high point or the flat point of the site. Again, the intent here is that both of these buildings would reflect inward to each other, having entrances that can share kind of a drop-off court, and I will let Josh talk about it later, which kind of looks at bringing in kind of the hydrology that comes to the site to help celebrate with stormwater and bioretention facilities in that space, kind of using that as kind of a centering effect between those two lobbies. Per the Route 1 manual, the intent is to look at having these buildings face and front Corridor Road. This is our streetscape, our street that's leading us down to the MARC station. In this process, we're looking at expanding. Corridor Road today is a very wide street. We have an opportunity to use some of the new tools that Howard County has provided in terms of complete streets to extend the curb out a little bit, narrow Corridor Road down, add curb and gutter, and make add the 8-foot wide sidewalk with landscaping between the pedestrian realm and the street itself. And that pedestrian walk would lead downhill from our drop-off area down to Junction Drive and then across the intersections there. And there's multiple ways to get around the parking garage, either along Dorsey Run Road and down some stairs, or around the garage and into the Savage MARC station there. And again, all of that within a 5-minute walk. These are a series of stacking plans. I'll start in the top left where it's level 1. Again, using that space in between the two buildings as kind of a drop-off court for some teaser parking, with the two lobbies of each building kind of fronting into each other, and looking at a strategy for the landscape to kind of tie those entrances together. The parking garage we pushed to the back of the site away from direct view from Corridor Road and tried to tuck service and loading just behind the lobby at the seam of that parking garage. It's a tight condition there. We don't have a lot of wiggle room because of some of the site constraints that Rob talked about earlier and just the general geometry of the site. Again, the building on the left, building A, is kind of a C-shaped building with the void of the CD facing north, and the other building is more of a L-shaped building with its open space kind of faced out towards the woods on the page right side. As I said earlier, building B sits on flat grade at the top of the hill, whereas building A actually has quite a bit of grade transition, and we'll see that as we look at the sections. But in plan view, the lower or the page left side of that building is actually transitioning down to a lower elevation that faces out to proposed stormwater management and open space amenity on that side of the building there. And as it stacks up, it just kind of, again, reinforces the C-shaped orientation of the building out to Corridor Road and the long edge of the L-shaped building of building B facing out to Corridor Road. So again, trying to hold the edge of Corridor Road to the best of our ability and create some building efficiency, and then use those two buildings to create that kind of shared court space in the middle. This in total, it's about 239 units and 437 spaces, both on site in the garage and within the drop-off court. This is the first section. This is, again, building B. This is the building that's relatively flat. Again, we positioned the buildings about 16 feet from the right-of-way. This gives us the ability to allow these buildings to be about 65 feet. with sufficient setback per the TOD zoning regulations to allow a little extra height over 60 feet. Again, we're pushing the corridor road streetscape out a little bit, about 4 feet from the edge of the existing open section of the roadway to give us enough space for the shared use pathway that leads us down to the MARC station. So transforming that public edge along those buildings there. And then to the back of the building is amenity space. I'll let Josh talk more about that as well. But you can see the distance from here, from building B out to Maryland Route 32. There's not a lot of grade change. There is a depression on the SHA site, but the roadway of 32 is relatively at the same elevation as building B. It's a different story with building A. With building A, corridor road is slipping downhill from that drop-off circle, and you can see the transition here with some slope. We are looking at landscaping that edge or using some small retaining walls to help kind of break up that hillscape there. But again, preserving the tree zone, the shared use path along corridor road as it comes down to the MARC station. But this grade transition does help us get our residential courtyard to kind of sit up high, provide a little bit of privacy from the road, but without sacrificing exposure to the western sunlight in the summer there. Again, the parking garage is pushed back behind the frontage of the residential building, and then kind of sitting along the buffer, which is the rear side and adjacent to the SHA parcel. Again, we do have quite a bit of distance from the edge of the building. It's over almost about 200 feet from the edge of the shortest point of the garage over to the edge of Dorsey Run Road. And there's adequate like forest area there to create more of a green screen between us and the roadway. In this condition, this Dorsey Road is dropping down along the backside of the A. You can see it's kind of a lower profile there at the street versus the finished floor of building A, level 1. And this is a quick snapshot looking back, an illustrative view. Again, corridor road is in the foreground. The MARC station is in the top right-hand corner. You can see how we've kind of positioned building B and building A to kind of reinforce corridor road as that primary pedestrian route down to the MARC station, and allowing that courtyard or the drop-off space in between to kind of puncture into the site, but use it as a focal point for both lobbies to speak to each other in that space. Here I'm going to hand it over to Ryan to talk about the architectural language, and then Josh will jump on and just talk about the site.
Thanks, Matthew. Yeah, as Matthew said, in this view here, we can see the overall perspective looking at the west side of the buildings. We have building B is on the left there, and that one is 6 stories, and then we transition the scale down as we go to building A on the right, which is primarily 5 stories, as Matthew said, and then has that additional lower level, which is off the right side where you can't see it right now. From a massing perspective, we wanted to give both buildings a different feeling when looking from corridor road, where building B has this more linear quality and building A is kind of broken down into these smaller boxes. The two buildings are sited across from each other in such a way as they frame that large landscape plaza area and the vehicular drop-off. The main entries, as Matthew said, of both buildings, they face each other across the plaza, so we really have that strong connection between the two. The central plaza really is that hub of activity, and the building massing reflects that with the vertical tower element on the corner of building B, yep, there, and the floating box, as we're calling it, on building A. So the primary amenity space is located in the ground floor of the floating box, which is really why we wanted to differentiate that element. Creates like an instantly identifiable landmark and a focal point on the building, signifying it as an important feature and an entrance. The floating box is separated from the adjacent wing by an amenity courtyard, which serves both buildings and features the pool and a landscape terrace as well. Architecturally, we're inspired by a sort of mercantile aesthetic with a strong base metal top reed. Yeah, let's I want to go back to that. Yeah, I'm still on this one here. Sorry. Strong base metal top reed, large window openings. We wanted both buildings to share an architectural language, but also wanted them to have unique expressions. So The floating bar has a more industrial aesthetic, metal and glass facade, and is a lighter feel to it, kind of floating over that glass base. The brick facades feature large, vertically oriented window bays and recessed balconies, which help give some depth as well. On building B, we've pulled the brick down at the top level to help break down the scale of the building and to give that top that sort of industrial penthouse feel. The top is also sort of undulated to help break up the length of that roof line. The base features a change in materials as well as taller expression, allowing for larger windows there and a little bit more open feel. And then finally at the garage, we're cladding that facade with the same brick detailing and similar architectural language as the main building to help disguise it, as it is a very prominent facade adjacent to the building entry. Go to the next slide. Yeah, so these are just a few of the precedent images that inspired our design, have a similar language to what we're intending for the project. Really, it's in the way that the buildings are kind of broken down in the massing, as well as that strong sort of mercantile or warehouse aesthetic with the brick detailing and the window openings combined, as well as those kind of vertical tower elements in the darker metal. Let's go to the next. So this is the main elevation along Corridor Road. Here we can see that the grade, really see that grade change in the way the massing steps down the hill. The floating box on building A can be seen with its dark charcoal colored metal panel facades floating over a glass base, which is the amenity space. The courtyard elevations to the right are expressed in a more traditional brick with like infilled panels of dark charcoal brick. And then the single story base there drops down on the right side to become double height as it goes down the hill. On building B on the left side has a similar language to A with the repetitive brick bays and strong base metal top expression. That corner element is separated from the main body of the building and reads as a more vertical tower element with a different brick color and a 2/2 window layout. And again, that corner is highlighted by a glass and metal bay that wraps and helps to signal that location of the entry lobby below. Next. So as we move to the south elevation of building A, on the top left here, we step the building down once again with the grade as it drops off, and we pick up that lower level there. The north elevation of A, which is on the bottom left, that features the building entrance as well as the garage facade, which has that similar language to the main brick facade. The garage is separated from the floating box by a vertical tower element clad in fiber cement panels, and it has more vertical windows. On the top right, the south elevation of building B features the main entrance to the building, and it also has a similar 2/2 window expression, as well as that base middle top read. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Josh to talk about landscape design.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Josh Kilrain. I'm a landscape architect with Horde Copeland Mott. What you're seeing on this slide is the entire site. As Matthew mentioned, it's a site with grade challenges. It's also kind of an awkward shape. And so we're trying to make the most of the spaces that we have to work with and really make this a nice place to live, to attract residents. And I think we're on our way to doing that with some of the things you see on here. I'll be talking about a few things here. The walking loop with an overlook. There's a residential courtyard, entry plaza there with the also referred to as the vehicle court earlier. There's walking paths that go around the perimeter with some seating areas. And of course, Rob earlier mentioned that forest conservation area up to the plan upper right. So let's get into a little bit more detail on some of these spaces. Here you see building A. And what I mean by making the use of some of the things that we have to do on site, such as stormwater management, because that does take up a lot of square footage of the site. To the left of building A there, you see with the number 3, that's a really large stormwater facility. And what we've done is created a perimeter path around that connects to both building A, as well as through a sloped walk down to the public sidewalk at Corridor Road. Number 2 there denotes a small seating area, intimate seating area along that pathway. Closely related to the building. And then on the left side of that path, you see some more benches that overlook that that stormwater facility, which would really be lushly planted, both on the top edges as well as the bottom, with species that we know that can survive in those sort of tough conditions that are created in stormwater facilities like this. Off to the right in Building A, you see a private residential courtyard featuring a swimming pool. Just to the north of that is a shade structure that serves that swimming pool deck. That's kind of you'll see some images of that later, precedent images, but what that does is, helps to kind of connect the masses of those buildings together along that tall wall that faces Corridor Road. So it kind of has a dynamic feeling that lends to that swimming pool deck, and also kind of forms a cap to that wall along Corridor Road. 7 and 6 there on the right, small shade structure, outdoor cooking, various types of lounge furniture and things that are intended to support the residential amenity area inside the building, expand that outward. So you have kind of your indoor, outdoor living throughout the year. Just to the north of the number 7 there, you see a grand staircase, a monumental staircase. That would obviously be gated for residents to enter, probably through a fob system, but that provides access down again to the public sidewalk along Corridor Road. Here we move over a little further north on the site. There's your vehicle court. So once people pull in there near the number 1, what we want to do is create really a feeling of entering a place that's an arrival and drop off and not a parking lot, even though it does contain some surface parking. So right there at the intersection of that entrance drive and Corridor Road, you'd have your project signage. And then we're proposing to use some unit paving material to make that feel more like a vehicular court rather than a parking lot. The darker lines you see there, denoted by the number 2, those are crosswalks. Again, Matthew had stated how those buildings face each other and those lobbies kind of talk to each other across this vehicle courtyard. And so we would intend to use a different material for those crosswalks to slow cars down and really give that space back to the pedestrian as much as possible. That number 3 there you see is another stormwater management facility that again will be very lushly planted because we want to make that kind of a central feature. That's one of the first things you're kind of seeing as you arrive. And in order to keep that crosswalk system from left to right, Building A to Building B, as an accessible route, you see a wall, kind of a thin dark line that would have to hold up that sidewalk along that stormwater facility. And that again would be constructed of a material or clad in a material that again would reflect the materials of the building. So again, visually tie those 2 pieces together across that vehicular courtyard. If you look down below this vehicular courtyard, you see the number 4 there, and that's what I'm calling kind of a gateway, small seating area there. Again, part of a larger perimeter walk system that also would include that public sidewalk along Corridor Road. But what that features is piers with ornamental lighting and enhanced planting that kind of denote a gateway to another part of that perimeter park or perimeter path system. As you move around to the rear of Building B, it leads to a more formal and active space for residents. Before in the other space we talked about, it was more of a passive recreation space. This is more of an active recreation space that features a shade structure. There would be opportunities for outdoor cooking with grills, again, various types of furniture. And then the number 6 there is showing kind of a formal lawn space that would be suitable for games or gatherings or kids just kind of run around. Being that it is located here behind the building, there is a nice buffer between Building B and that active recreation space with another large stormwater management facility denoted by number 3 there. Again, very lushly planted so that when you're looking out the building, you have a little bit of a separation visually from the activity going on in that space, but also looks nice as you're looking out of your apartment window. If you move up to the right there towards the upper right, the other parking lot, there's your other residential amenity area and lobby. And again, there featuring low landscape walls, piers, and lighting on those piers to denote another gateway. Again, that materiality would reflect the building materials. And all of this path system here, we envision to be illuminated by pedestrian scale post top lights, 12 to 14 feet tall, dark sky fixtures with house side shields. So we're directing that light really down on the path and not towards those buildings or those residential units. Here's a collection of images just to sort of show the character that we're going for. Over on the left there, you see those crosswalks. That is is showing an asphalt parking lot, but you see that change in material for the crosswalks. That image below is a little bit closer to sort of what we're going for, where you have a vehicle court where it really forces people to slow down and feel like you're really off of a road and not necessarily in a parking lot or a drop off or arrival area at lobbies. Some of the other images there, the Fenwick sign at the bottom, the Roland Park Place sign over to the side, just different materials for project signage that could be employed. The wood clad walls there, kind of in the middle. Images down the bottom there, you see that sort of circuitous walk through landscaped areas. That's sort of the character of what you'd find walking in that area behind Building B. And then to the right of that, again, an example of kind of an entry pier to denote those gateways to that space. And then the upper top, or the images at the top, middle and right, are sort of indicative of that shade structure. Again, not the exact design, but sort of indicative of the materials that might be used, that metal, some wood, really to complement the architecture and bring that language down to the residential amenity spaces. And then lastly, just some examples of that planting palette. Again, heavy on natives, which we always like to do, both shade trees and ornamental trees. And then your perennials and shrubs obviously can be used, at your at-grade planting areas, your gateways, but also, a lot of those plants that you see on here, the inkberry holly, the sweet spire, goldenrod, and the switchgrass, those are plants that are perfectly, suited for those stormwater management facilities. And they're real survivors. So they're a really varied plant palette that offers interest throughout the year, color change, leaf color change, flowering, to provide that year-round interest, to really keep the site, looking nice throughout the year.
Concludes our formal presentation.
So, can everyone hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now, Bob.
Oh, okay. So it's, we'd like a staff report now?
Yep. So Nick's out on vacation, so I'm going to do the quick staff report for him. As the team mentioned, this is a newly created parcel from former state right-of-way that is split zone TOD and M1. There are environmental features on the site as identified by the team in their early presentation that will need to be addressed through the planning and zoning process. In terms of the DAP review, we'd like to get comments on the site plan, the orientation and layout, the configuration of the buildings and structures as they relate to each other, as well as the frontage roads and the interchange ramp. We'd like to gather input on the architecture, the scale of both buildings and the design materials that were being selected and proposed, and then focusing in on the amenity spaces, both the landscaped amenity spaces, the public landscaped amenity spaces around the buildings, and the courtyard design between the buildings. Any input that the DAP has on those key features would be appreciated as we work with the team in their follow-up steps through development.
Okay. I'll kick it off and then open it up to the rest of the panel. So why did you bother showing these wonderful great trees on the site and their drip zones and then bulldoze them down and not work around them?
I'll take that, Bob. Yeah, what you're not seeing is probably all the trees that we are retaining in the forest conservation area. So these trees, as you heard, this is a very challenged site topographically and geometrically. And without removing, obviously, it's not just the green dot that is the issue with the tree. It's the critical root zone. And if we were to eliminate grading sufficient enough to retain those trees, we basically wouldn't have much of any development window left. So
why even show it?
oh, just because planning and zoning, I mean, it really is a planning and zoning requirement that we look at specimen trees, and we want to be as transparent as possible.
These are the trees we're going to kill. Okay, I got that. So next is we always shoot wonderful pictures of what you're going to do with landscape, and yet we never ever see a landscape plan. Anyone? No? Okay.
So a full landscape plan, Bob? I mean, the full landscape plan would be developed during the SDP phase. So, you know, barring other changes to grading and building layout or other changes that could happen, that's at the time that would happen. So at this point, we thought it appropriate to show you examples of where our thinking is headed.
I would kind of say it's hard to make comments for landscaping when there is no landscaping plan. So,
yeah, okay. So, any of my other panelists have a comment? Ethan?
Dan, go ahead. I'll go after you.
okay. Two of my biggest things I have issues with.
You're on mute,
is,
Ethan.
and can you hear me?
You're on mute.
No, we can hear Dan. We can hear him.
Okay, so this entrance plaza that you have, I think this is open to a lot of accidents, because what happens when someone turns in and goes, oh, it's quicker to take a quick left right here, which is a little confusing because you don't want people having a choice to go straight or turn left right there. You want them to almost be one way, like a roundabout, all the way on there. Because if you don't, you're going to get people cutting across. So, which I think you're going to lead you to accidents. Do you understand what I'm talking about?
Is your recommendation to
To turn,
narrow?
yeah, make it a one way.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. I think we have some just turning radius challenges that we just need to work through how emergency vehicles can make that turn and still provide adequate slope for that center median where we have stormwater management.
But that would be my recommendation, because I just think it's going to be prone to accidents if you don't make it one way.
Yeah, I agree with you that if we can reduce the amount of paving there and tighten up those lanes, I think that'll definitely help go a long way.
Another thing is the loading area. I would like to see an area dedicated, like a parking spot or something for, for people picking up packages, DoorDash, all that kind of stuff. If you can have a couple of dedicated spots for that, would be wonderful to add. Because as we know, we get a lot of people. There's a lot of orders. You know what I mean? There's a lot of packages going in these places. And would like them to be able somewhere to park, right? And deliver packages. So that would be another recommendation for me. And another recommendation I think can be done fairly easy is your amenity area number 1 in the back toward Dorsey Run. I would just connect that trail all the way up to the other side of the parking garage where the other one is, just to make it a loop.
Yeah, I think I think we try to take a look at that. There's some topography
Grading issues
in that zone, but I think as we get into some refined studies, we can take a look at that and try to see how we can do that.
Okay. And this will be my final comment. Along Corridor Road, you've got these shade trees in this little strip. How wide is that strip going to be? Planting strip?
That's a good question. It's
'Cause
probably
I
about
think you-
about
Yep.
7 feet.
I think we were anticipating that to be about a 7 foot wide planting strip.
Oh, okay. That's great.
We,
And
we
then how wide is your sidewalk in the front? It looks quite large.
the sidewalk in front is 8 feet per
Okay,
the
that's good.
requirements.
Oh, one more thing. Just a little concerned with parking for building B. So I'm assuming that parking lot is not big enough to hover everybody for building B. You're just going to provide them additional parking in the parking garage?
Yeah, that is one of the challenges of the site. But yes, the parking garage is sized for both building A and building B with overflow parking to the page right of building B.
Okay, that's it for me, guys. Ethan, over to you.
Sure, I'm happy to jump in here. I have a couple of observations and a couple comments. But before I get started, I want to commend you guys for taking on a challenging site, very wacky, and I think you've done a pretty good job with this. These are great sites. I think this is smart growth, right? Using these kind of leftover pieces of land in highway interchanges is really good to see. I think because of that, a lot of the challenges that you've come up against, I don't see as big issues, right? I think if this was a rational site, I'd probably think you were trying to cram too much stuff on it, but it seems fine for this site to me, given the buffers you have and some of the geometric challenges you have. From an observation standpoint, I'm interested to know sort of outside of your site collaborations that may or may not have happened. I think your pedestrian network zone tying into the station makes a lot of sense, and I just want to be sure that that's been considered with some of the other development that's happening with the apartment building that's existing, as well as proposed in other sites immediately in this area that have come before this panel. And I'll open this up for questions because it's two-part, right? The other one is stormwater with these SHA sites, right? Is there any opportunity to create better quantity, better quality, whatever it may be, by working in collaboration with these sites, particularly to the one that's on the left of this screen? I'm going to put those out as questions, and then I have a couple other comments, but I'd like to just sort of hear about those opportunities. And I know they're outside of your site, but I wonder, and it might be a county question as well, Anthony, but has that stuff been explored at all?
This is Rob. Ethan, how are you?
Good.
The good points on the stormwater ponds. Those are state highway BMPs. State highway is somewhat protective of their BMPs and don't really like to commingle with the development runoff. So we're really trying to provide 100% of the requirement outside of those facilities and not impact those facilities. But I am sure and I am certain that during this process, we are going to be working hand in hand with the SHA hydraulics folks because of the relationship of these sites to those ponds, and we'll see if maybe there's something we can do that complements each other, that we can that we could cooperate and maybe enhance those facilities or enlarge those facilities. But yeah, my experience has been that State Highway really is quite protective of their BMPs.
That seems like a missed opportunity through no fault of your own. Okay. The comments I have about the buildings and the layout of the buildings. Again, I don't think there's much else you can do working with the shapes you have. But I have two concerns that I think are somewhat interrelated. I think you've spent a lot of energy on making this really great plaza. That really ends up being devoted to the automobile, right? And is there a way that that can somehow become an amenity, right? Not just a parking lot. I don't know if it's just a scale factor as I'm looking at the site plan, but the cars seem really, really small and compared to the amount of asphalt. Maybe to some of Dan's points there. But I wonder if there's a way to play with the garage, which is my next concern. You know, to help sort of pull some of those cars directly off the road and into the garage and maybe give some of that space back to pedestrians. But my concern with the garage is really the Dorsey Run facing facade, which you haven't elevated in your proposal. It's perched up on a hill and is substantially higher than the adjacent apartment complex, right? And you're creating this kind of domineering presence over top of that building, right into people's apartments, with lights from cars at nighttime potentially shining into windows. I'm not sure if there's a plan for a facade treatment of that. But I wonder if there's an opportunity here to sink this garage partially into the ground and push it down a little bit, right? Maybe address some of that facade issues. I understand cost to go below grade is more than to go up. But in looking at the sections you've provided to drop a couple, you know, 2-3 floors down, could really address that facade concern a lot without spending a lot of money on a facade that's kind of a, you know, for lack of a better word, a dumb facade. So is there an opportunity to do that and sort of decrease the massing because you are perched up on the hill and the relationship to that apartment building? You have a very clear front, very clear back, but I think the back is so overpowering because of the topography issues that you have, that something needs to be done there. So that's really the extent of my comments.
I think that's worth exploring. I think it really depends on how much of that soil that's there is of good quality and has to be moved. I don't think we're at a point, and Rob, you can correct me, I don't think there's a geotech report for the grounds, but I think, you know, as we move forward, just trying to take a look at what those conditions are. I don't think the hill is a native condition. I think this has all been regraded and reworked as they constructed Route 32 and these interchanges. At one point, this was all clear cut and you know, mass graded. So I don't know what is of good quality soil and what has just been kind of dumped there, but I think it's worth kind of studying and seeing if we have that opportunity to, if we need to lose the bad stuff, let's push the garage down.
All right. Thanks, Ethan. So I only have maybe 2 comments on the site. This is actually probably a good one, or the next one of the south landscape plan, if you can go to that next slide. Knowing where the transit station is, and this is transit-oriented development, has number 1 looked at being flipped or mirrored to make that closer to the intersection so that residents have a kind of more direct path back up into this building?
Yeah, I guess the way number 1 is working is it's traversing the slope. There's a bit of grade change from that landscape area down to Corridor Road. So if we flipped it, we wouldn't have an accessible route. We would have to rely on ADA ramping, stairs, etc., and a lot more retaining to make that work.
I was just curious if there was a way to make it kind of quicker and then your accessible route be, you know, more towards the front of the building, but that makes sense. Then one of my other comments is you talked about loading being kind of at the back of building A and near that parking garage. Where is like trash collection for either both or individual buildings proposed? Kind of getting into Ethan's point of transit through that courtyard.
Yeah, so unfortunately, building A's loading and trash is kind of clustered right there at the seam between in the garage on the backside of A. But building B has potential trash enclosure at the northern end of building B on the backside, allowing the vehicle to come in on that northern parking lot and pick up.
So,
Is
so
that where residents would be able to unload and load as well? Or I'm just looking at the plans that doesn't show anything like kind of covered unloading for residents for move in, move out.
Yeah, I think we have the ability on a very short-term basis to get curbside unloading in front of building A in the plaza space. Building B, I think we can provide an opportunity along that uh, the outside of the parking bay there, adjacent to the dumpster, if they need to unload and come in the back door of building B.
Those are kind of the extent of the site comments. I think, with what you've had here to work with, you've gotten a lot in a way that makes a lot of sense and logic. As far as the building, I'd only recommend maybe looking at building B's corner, that entrance element a little bit more. The building A element with your floating cube is, I like that idea a lot. It reads really well. You can see that's where you come in, you enter. Building B, I don't believe is as strong as a entrance call to action. So that might be something to either not necessarily replicate the floating cube of A, but something that gives it a similar strong language. I barely noticed the two different color changes of brick when I was looking at the report before this meeting. And I wouldn't have noticed it until you pointed it out, that there's a lightly colored brick versus a darker brick on that corner. So maybe look at the language of that corner on building B a little bit more to see if you can get that entrance language a little stronger.
Sure, we can take that into account.
That's the main extent of my comments, but otherwise, it's a pretty nice charrette, and I like how you've treated the two buildings differently. They're siblings, not exactly the same, not twins.
Bob, are you still with us?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I can't see your video.
So, are we done with the presentation? Hello?
Yep, I think presentation's
I
done.
think we're done.
Okay,
Like
anyone
comments
have
or
any motions?
I'd like to raise a motion that the applicant study the parking garage in a attempt to address the relationship to the adjacent buildings across Dorsey Run Road, either by presenting the elevations of that facade to the county, or preferably by sinking the garage further into grade.
Any seconds?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Passes. Anything else?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion. I'd like for the entrance plaza to be a one-way, and so all traffic is running in one direction. And I would also recommend loading areas for both buildings.
Any seconds?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes. Anything else? Okay, I would hope that at some point we get an actual landscape plan, not a bunch of images for this project, which I've asked for every project that we've ever had, and we never get. But I would love to have a landscape plan with species, sizes, and locations.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we will accept this. And we would hope that you would comply with that and submit that plan to planning and zoning. So other than that, I guess we're done.
Well, thank you for the feedback, and we look forward to pushing this through and making this a better plan.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anthony, do we have any other business?
No other business other than our new director starts June 26th. So if there are any changes to our process, I will keep you posted. I might try to have her come and join a meeting to say hello one evening, but that is to be determined based on our next scheduled meeting and her availability. So other than that, we're all set.
I would like the panel to stay on for a second.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Anthony,
Yeah.
I'm done. This is the most worthless thing. I'm sorry that it is, but we never know what these people do. You never follow up with our recommendations for what we want them to do. I find it to be they never submit landscape plans. I'm pretty much really